This story happened about a year ago, but only now have I had the energy to tell it to you. Please subscribe to the channel and write a comment about what kind of stories you would like to see on my channel. Thank you. Well, I'm going to start my story. I started having problems with my spouse not too long ago. About a couple months ago, maybe a little earlier. I can remember exactly. At first I thought married life was a great time in everyone's life. But as the years went by, we began to spend less and less time with each other. The romance and tenderness in the relationship disappeared. I can't remember the last time I had sex with my own wife. We'd disappear to work and only meet for dinner. Sometimes on the weekends we'd go out on the town for coffee and a walk. I think that's what happens in all families. We haven't had children yet, and I don't think we will after what I'm about to tell you. We just recently got married and started living together. We rented a cheap apartment in a Chicago neighborhood. Everything was perfect before we got married. Romance, gifts, restaurant dates. After the wedding, the first time I came home from work, the smell in the apartment was unbelievably delicious. On the table, warm dinner, the house is bright and cozy. It would seem that still need a man for complete happiness. The absence of quarrels, a full stomach, warmth and coziness in the house. And life turns into a fairy tale. But my fairy tale didn't last as long as I wanted. The smell of delicious food slowly disappeared from the house, and quarrels over nothing became daily. I didn't know why. I thought that my wife was just tired at work. Sometimes I had thoughts that she had a lover, but I made sure there was no one. I thoroughly checked her phone and computer while she slept. I slowly began to lose the urge to go home, and I looked for reasons to stay at work as long as possible. I started staying late on purpose. Sometimes I'd walk home from work even if it took hours. But when Mary called me, I had to speed up to avoid another scandal at home. I have no friends, no family except Mary. My mom died when I was little, and I hadn't seen my dad since I was born. So I had nowhere to go and no one to complain to. Why not just get a divorce? That's probably a question that comes up for most people. I don't know, because I love her. Yes, and I was hoping that the problem would be solved and we would be a happy and friendly family again. We've tried several times to sit down and talk to each other without yelling or fighting. Sometimes it worked, but unfortunately not for long. One day we were going to go to Mary's in-laws. We had to visit Grandma. She misses me. I agreed. We didn't have a car, so we decided to take an airplane to Miami. Mary was in high spirits that day and even made me breakfast. I was surprised. That was very rare. We bought plane tickets, took a cab to the airport, and I always slept during the flight. Grandma was really looking forward to us. Mary was calm and I was annoyed by everything. The crowd of people that gathered at the airport exit, the view out the window, and even the huge black cloud. Leaving the plane, we rushed to a small parking lot near the airport. The bus we needed stopped there nearby. We waited for it for about an hour. I was mad as a hungry dog. It was like Mary and I had switched places. She's usually freaking out about every little thing, and I'm trying to calm her down. Like I said, an hour later, a bus pulled up to the bus stop and a lot of people got on. My wife and I had to stand. It was going to be about 40 minutes. I was thinking about how far away her grandmother lived. Holding on to the handrails and wobbling from side to side, I regretted 1,000 times that I sold my old pickup truck. It may be old and sometimes broke down, but I could get in and drive. It's hard without a car nowadays. When we got to Granny's village, Mary remembered again that we hadn't been here in over a year. It wasn't a rich village, and things had changed for the worse in a year. Grandma met us at the front of the house. It was as if she had been waiting at the door the whole time we were there. There was a modest table waiting for us in the house. I will not describe in detail how we sat and what we talked about. I will only say that the old woman had changed a lot both externally and internally. She is already more than 80 years old, which is surprising. It would seem strange, but sometimes her behavior frightened me. For example, when we were having dinner, she was sitting chewing a piece of meat and saying something, and then she would scream. I thought at first maybe she was sick, but after she stopped screaming, after a few seconds she continued her story as if nothing had happened. Her hands were also shaking very badly. Since the person was old, my wife asked me not to pay attention to this behavior, realizing that the old woman's brain was slowly beginning to die. I agreed. In the evening we took a shower and sat down to drink tea in the kitchen. Granny sits quietly and then sharply beats her fist on the table. I jumped up on the spot with fright. For a few seconds the old lady looked at Mary straight in her eyes. That look made me feel scared. But then Granny continued to sit at the table and calmly drank her tea. I tried to ignore these oddities, but with each such situation it became harder and harder to do so. We'd only been here a couple days, but I doubted I could stand it. At night, after we'd gone to bed, I heard her footsteps, and the lights weren't on anywhere. I could understand if she'd gone for a drink of water or to the bathroom. But no, she was just walking around the house, creaking loudly on the old boards. It kept me awake for a long time. At about 2 o'clock in the morning I fell asleep, but I didn't sleep till morning. I woke up because my grandmother was standing right above our bed and whispering something. It was very fast, so I couldn't make out a word. I lay there pretending to be asleep and listening to all this nonsense. And she's standing right beside our bed, staring at Mary, who's sleeping, with her scary eyes. I was scared, but my wife slept peacefully until the old woman put her palm on her face. At that moment her sleep was interrupted and she almost fell off the bed from fright. And the grandmother calmly turned around and went to her room, not stopping to whisper incomprehensible words. I immediately offered my wife to return home, but it was night and we decided to leave in the morning. Something strange was going on with the grandmother. We did not sleep until morning, and as soon as it dawned, we packed our things and called a cab. Grandma seemed to return to her usual appearance and even persuaded us to stay longer, but I lied that I urgently needed to go to work. We got in the car and drove off, and Grandma still stood at the entrance and watched the cab drive away. I felt sorry for her. Death with a scythe was already waiting for her, and of course she wanted her grandchildren and children to visit her more often. From that day on, things started to get a little strange and unusual for me in a good way. We came home tired and Mary still had time to cook dinner. Grandma had passed on the meat, the local hunters had given it to her. The smell of delicious meat stew with vegetables filled the apartment. But it was a little strange because usually after such travels or walks, Mary was very tired and immediately lay down on the bed. She only gets up when she has to go to the bathroom. Maybe her grandmother told her how to behave with a man. When we left the village, they were still talking about something outside while I was packing my bags. The smile did not disappear from my wife's face, and it was very unusual for me. But you get used to good things. Mary became calm and romance returned to our relationship. I don't know where she got all that energy. She had time to go to work and cook and go to the gym. Almost every day she spoiled me with different interesting dishes and even bought a recipe book. It was very strange. It was like I started living with another woman and I liked it. There was one thing that was strange. Mary sometimes stayed late at work, but very rarely and not for very long. She works at the courthouse, but I had no reason not to trust her. One evening I was reading the news in my armchair while my wife was preparing another culinary masterpiece in the kitchen. And here in one of the city news portals I saw the news. I wouldn't have paid attention to it if it weren't for the familiar location, the gym my wife used to go to sometimes. A girl's body was found near that gym. It's hard to call what was in the photo a body. Workers who came to repair something found it. I broke the news to my wife, but she only resented me for showing her such a gruesome picture before dinner. It was the first time I'd seen her displeased face in days. I put the phone on the table and went to wash my hands. Mary picked it up and started reading the news about the girl's death. When I came back, she told me she realized who it was. It said she was last seen leaving the gym. The beef stew smelled good all over the house. Without waiting for my wife, I devoured the dish as if I hadn't been fed in days. Mary asked if I wanted more, and naturally I didn't say no. There was a lot of meat in the fridge, like my wife had robbed a farm. She told me that her coworker's mom works at a butcher shop at her job and sells fresh meat to everyone at a low price. It wouldn't be bad if one of her coworker's relatives worked at the brewery. Dinner was delicious, and everything would have been fine if that night I hadn't gotten a stomachache so bad I was ready to die. I was in the bathroom for about 2 hours, and Mary was fine. It was weird, but I figured I had eaten something not fresh at work. I never got a good night's sleep. I was running to the bathroom until the wee hours of the morning. I didn't even have to go to work because my stomach hurt so much. Then the events began to unfold even faster. There was more and more meat in the fridge. No, I do not mind, but we do not have time to eat it, and several times we had to throw it away. Once again, I opened the fridge and told Mary that was enough. The freezer's full, the fridge is full, we could open the store ourselves. My wife wasn't happy, but she agreed with me. She said when she ran out, she'd buy more. So we lived in peace and harmony. I've already forgotten the last time we quarreled. On the anniversary of our engagement, I prepared a gold bracelet for my wife. But Mary left for work early in the morning, so I didn't get a chance to congratulate her. So I decided to wait for her. I look out the window and she's walking toward the house. I quickly hid with the gift in our closet and I'm waiting. As soon as my wife enters the apartment, I'll jump out with the present. There was the sound of the door opening. Mary came into the house. She had a big bag in her hands. I'm sitting in the closet as if I'm not there. The closet in our hallway is large, and from it you can see almost the entire first floor. I look through the gap between the doors and watch her. She went first into one room, then into another, and apparently convinced that I wasn't there. She went into the kitchen and put a bag on the table. I was ready to jump out, but something stopped me. I looked and she was pulling out a bloody human head from the bag. At first I even assumed it was some kind of prank, but the real human head looked too realistic. Blood was dripping from it, and there was hair hanging from the neck area. I sat there motionless, unable to even move, and she was standing in the kitchen, holding the head and looking at it with such an interested look, as if she was thinking what to do with it now. From the looks of it, the head belonged to some guy. Besides the head, she took out a few other bags of meat and threw them into the refrigerator. She examined the head for about 10 seconds, then picked up the knife. Before my eyes, my beloved wife cut off first the hair from my head and then opened the skull and took out the brain. So I sat in the closet, unable to do anything. Meanwhile, Mary started cooking, cleaned up the blood and left an open carton of tomato juice on the edge of the table. She mixed everything she cut from the head with ordinary meat and twisted it in a meat grinder. I took the rest of the skull and put it in my big jewelry box. Apparently realizing I never looked in it, I realized that I had been eating human meat every day for a month. Immediately I threw up. Mary heard the sounds and immediately froze in place. At that moment I thought I was going to faint from the unbearable horror. My wife went around and looked in every room, but to my joy did not look in the closet. When she was done cleaning and destroying the gruesome evidence, she decided to call me. The ringtone echoed throughout the hallway. Mary turned in my direction once again. As soon as she approached the closet, I immediately jumped out of it with shouts and congratulations. My wife, as soon as she saw me with the gift, started smiling and talking about how good I was. And I became disgusted and scared. When asked why I was trembling so much, I answered that I was afraid that she would not like the gift. With these words, I took a velvet jewelry box out of my pocket and opened it. Mary liked the bracelet very much, and she hugged me tightly and kissed me. I tried to think of ways to get away, but she wouldn't let me go, as if realizing that I had seen everything and knew everything. Mary called me to dinner. Just the sight of the food, or rather not even the sight of it, but the realization of what it was made of made me sick. But I decided to sit down quietly at the table. Mary was eating human meat with great appetite and asked me why I wasn't eating. I answered that I wasn't hungry. She looked at me like I'd ruined her life. She threw her fork on the table and said she'd figured it all out. Then she started screaming in a scary voice and threatening me. All the light bulbs in the house burst at one point, plunging the room into darkness. It was good that the light from the lampposts illuminated our house a little. Then I saw something that still comes to me in my nightmares. Mary stood up from the table, and I realized it was as if she wasn't even her anymore. Her mouth was crooked, and the skin on her face was covered with strange, creepy, dark spots. Her head suddenly tilted to the right, as if her neck had snapped. Her eyes flashed with little yellow lights, and she reached for me with her hand. Terror gripped me again, giving this monster a chance to grab me by the neck. It grabbed me so tightly that it felt like it had to make one move, and my head would fall to the floor. I had a surge of adrenaline, and gathering all the strength in my fist, hit her right in the head. The monster shrieked and fell to the floor. I, without wasting time, rushed out of the house. I ran very fast. Don't ask me where my strength came from. I don't know. That night I called the police and told them everything, but I ruled out the fact that my wife was talking in a voice that was not her own, and was turning into a creepy creature. They didn't find the wife in the apartment, just like they didn't find meat in the fridge or dishes on the stove. They didn't find the skull in the jewelry box either. The police wanted to send me to a psychiatric hospital, but they managed to negotiate. No treatment. I tried to prove to the cops that the girl found dead in the sewer was my wife, but they just laughed. I didn't go back home, changed my phone number, rented another apartment. But a couple of days ago I was woken up in the middle of the night by a persistent ringing at the door. I sleepily went to the hallway, and on the way I wondered who could have visited me at night. When I reached the peephole, I almost fell to the floor at what I saw. In the darkness I saw a dark female silhouette with long arms, and most importantly, 2 yellow eyes on the head bent to the right. A hard bang on the door finally woke me up, and threats were heard from the entryway. How did she find me? That was the only thing I thought about at the time. From the sounds behind the wall, the neighbors woke up from the rumble and she ran away in a hurry. I looked out the window to make sure she was gone, but the monster was standing under a lamppost on the far side of our yard. The dress she wore on the anniversary of our engagement was dirty. Her arms hung down to her knees, and her eyes stared straight into my soul. Even though there was a great distance between us, I could feel her gaze on me. Then the creature bent and with small but quick steps ran into the darkness. All night I stayed awake and heard her footsteps outside the house. She waited for me under the door until morning, and besides her footsteps I could hear her saying something, just like her grandmother, who we had recently visited. In the morning when she disappeared, I gathered all the necessary things and decided to go to the village to the old woman. It was after visiting her that Mary had changed a lot. In the village I found nothing but abandoned ruins of old houses. Not a single person, all overgrown with grass and huge bushes. I wondered at first who we were visiting. Maybe Mary's parents could answer that. We hardly spoke to them, but I decided to stop by that evening. They told me something that made me scared again. It turns out that Mary's grandmother had been dead for about a year now. I silently walked out of Mary's parents' house and drove home. She'll probably come knocking on my door again tonight. I think I'll stop by the church on the way. Maybe they'll help me.